Hey guys, Will here. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the craziness that's going on in the sim racing scene in general at the moment. I wanted to sort of offer my, I guess, somewhat unique perspective and insight onto some of the things that I know a lot of people are frustrated about and concerned about at the moment. So we're going to firstly talk about manufacturing and supply of equipment. Then we're going to move across into talking more about the community and I guess what's happening around esports and, competitions and real life motorsport transitioning across into sim racing, what that means for sim racing longer term. So we'll start off by talking about manufacturing. Now, if you spent any time online on Facebook groups or forums recently, you would have seen a lot of people complaining about not being able to get their hands on gear. So there's been a lot of frustration around, shipping times, lack of stock. So I'm lucky that in my job as a content creator, I have really great relationships with most of the major manufacturers across pretty much every facet of sim racing. So I wanted to sort of offer a bit of unique insight from the conversations that I've had with a lot of those guys to sort of give you a bit of knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes here. So basically, back in late December, early January, when we first figured out what was going on with this pandemic before it was actually called a pandemic, first thing that happened was China went into lockdown. So manufacturing basically ground to a halt, supply ground to a halt. And what that meant for sim racing was that, the supply of componentry to begin with was basically completely cut off. So the vast majority of componentry that's used across the entire electronics industry does come from China or Asia in general. So, all the semiconductors, all the ICs, all the chips, all the resistors, all that stuff is all manufactured pretty much in Asia. So all the companies that relied on it basically couldn't build any more gear. Now, one of the first areas that this really impacted was in more cockpit type stuff. So aluminium extrusion in particular, most of which is manufactured in China. And that's the reason why you're seeing the massive backlog in orders that you're seeing now. So most of those companies are now back up and running in terms of their supply. China's pretty much back in action again now. So basically what's happening is those companies are now working through the backlog of orders. So what I would suggest there is, get in touch with those individual companies that you've ordered from, find out from them exactly what's going on. And at least in my experience, they're being pretty transparent about the situation and they're happy to sort of, give you updated timelines. And you got to remember as well that everybody's in uncharted territory here. So, I'm not trying to defend anybody's actions here. I have seen a couple of companies that I think could have definitely handled their communication a little bit better, let's just say. But in general, everybody's doing their best in uncharted territory here. Now, after that, it started to sort of move across more into things like steering wheels, wheelbases. We saw massive delays in, supply from companies like FANATEC and Simukube as well. Now, the reason for that is multifaceted. So not only did we have the interruption to the supply chain as well as the manufacturing, but also interruptions in logistics. And all of that combined all at the same time that there was a massive increase in the demand. So what I wanted to do here is just quickly show you some Google Trends charts here, just so you get an idea of exactly what's going on. So first of all, we have here the period of May 2015 through to right now in terms of searches for sim racing on Google. So this is all the people that are searching for sim racing related content on Google over the course of the last 5 years or so. So what you can see here is a massive spike right around the beginning of March. And that coincides with obviously when everybody started to go into lockdown, all the real life motorsport started closing and people started transitioning across into sim racing. And that's also kind of reflected as well in my own channel's analytics. So if you look around the 1st of March here, you can see there was a big increase. I was getting about 15,000 views a day. And then that's gone up to at its peak. It's a little bit distorted here because, obviously I've had some videos that have been more popular than others as I've been releasing quite a few quick start guides and stuff like that. So it's a little bit kind of all over the place, but you can see the general trend is an increase of about 3 to 4 times the number of views. But we can go a little bit more granular than that even. We can have a look at FANATEC, for example. You can see if we have a look at the data from the 28th of April, so for the past year. So you can see there's a massive spike there for Black Friday, and that happens pretty much every year because it's the only time of the year that FANATEC do any sort of sales. But again, from the 1st of March, pretty much massive increase. You can see it goes from 25% to 100% there. So a 4 times increase, basically exactly the same as what we saw for general searches in sim racing. So no surprises there. Now, if we have a look at Simukube for comparison as well, from the 28th of April, so in the last year, pretty much the same deal. Again, it's increased. You can see it's a little bit more up and down because it's it's a less well-established and smaller company than FANATEC is by comparison. But, again, from about 30 up to 100 there. So about probably three to four times the number of searches for Simucube over the course of the last 2 months as opposed to normal. So you can see a massive increase in demand. So you couple that increase in demand with the disruptions to manufacturing and supply chain as well as logistics, and that creates a situation that we're in now. So from all the conversations that I've had with all the major manufacturers, and that's at least 20 or so brands that I've spoken with over the last couple of months, pretty much they're all saying the same thing. They're all struggling to meet the demand, as well as struggling with logistics, struggling with supply, and they're all doing their best. So I think what we need to do is try and be as patient as we possibly can, and also be mindful that a lot of the holdups now, especially as China's now sort of starting to come back into action, are actually in the logistics side. So the manufacturers themselves are doing a pretty good job of supply now, but we're seeing a lot of holdups in the actual logistics side or delivery side. And that's simply because of the massive increase in demand on home delivery as well, because people are in lockdown, they can't go to the shops, they're ordering their groceries online. And yeah, it's just been a massive increase on the demand on our local delivery services as well. So I guess what I'm saying here is try to be a little bit patient. Don't go flaming the businesses themselves, because I know that they are doing the best they possibly can. The bottom line is these guys would be making a lot more money than they are right now if they were able to meet the demand. It really is a case of, there's a lot more demand than they're able to supply at the moment. And interestingly, that's also having a bit of a knock-on effect for content creators as well. We're seeing the amount of spend on advertising in general. So the amount of money that we're getting per 1,000 views and per click on YouTube is actually down quite significantly despite the extra views that we're getting. And that's simply because companies across every industry are basically having to cut right back on their marketing spend, because what's the point in spending a lot of money on marketing when you can't meet the demand as it is? It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I'm sure any content creator that you'll speak to will say that, despite the huge increase in views, the actual amount of revenue being generated by ads on YouTube is actually not what it would be, and it's not in line with the increase. So just an interesting little statistic there for you as well. But I hope that offers you a little bit of insight into what's going on behind the scenes in terms of supply and demand around sim racing gear at the moment. So let's move on to the community side of things now. So it's been a really interesting time for sim racing, a really exciting time for sim racing in general over the last couple of months. Obviously, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of attention that sim racing is getting, as you saw before. And, partly that's due to people just being bored in lockdown at home and looking for new hobbies, partly due to the transition from real life motorsport across into sim racing as well. But I'm a little bit concerned about some of the trends that I'm seeing here. And I'm sure a lot of you guys would have been noticing a lot of this as well. So there's been quite a bit of negativity already around a lot of these esports competitions that have been formed off the back of motorsports being cancelled. So for example, there's been a couple of drivers now that have lost their real life sponsorships over their conduct in their streaming or in their online races. And that, it's been a bit of an interesting topic, because a few people have been kind of triggered by that. A few people have been saying that's absolutely ridiculous. It's just a game. Why would they lose their real life sponsorship? But the thing you got to realize here is that, the reason why real life motorsport is transitioning across into esports is because they don't really have a choice. They have financial commitments to their sponsors. Their sponsors are all pulling the pins because, they're not getting the exposure that they should be through TV and stuff. So they really don't have a choice other than to transition to the only thing which can provide any exposure right now, and that's sim racing. So, to them, the business is no different from what it is on a normal broadcast with the real life cars. So they have to maintain a certain level of professionalism. And personally, from my own perspective, I don't have a problem with these drivers losing their sponsorship over the things that they did. And the reason for that is because, they are paid professionals. They're being paid a lot of money to present themselves professionally. And why should their conduct be any different? And I think the problem here is that, a lot of these drivers aren't taking sim racing seriously. They're only doing it because they're contractually obliged to do so. They're not the slightest bit interested in sim racing. And I mean, there are exceptions to this. Obviously, we do have a lot of drivers that are massive in the sim racing industry. Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Shane Van Gisbergen, for example. All of those guys are huge into the sim racing, and they do an awful lot for the community. And not to diminish from that in any sense at all. But, the vast majority of these drivers that we're seeing, in these esports competitions at the moment that we're watching on TV and on Twitch and on Facebook and various different platforms, they're not doing it because they enjoy sim racing and because they're sim racing enthusiasts. They're doing it because their teams are telling them they have to, and it's the only way that they're going to be able to survive this period when they're not able to drive in real life. So it's not about learning, it's not about training, it's not about honing their skills and maintaining their skills, at least not for the most part. It's about sponsorship money. And I think that, when you make it about money and not about passion and about community, that's a real dangerous area to get into. So I think as a community, we just need to be really careful that we don't, I guess, get too caught up in the hype that's going on at the moment. We need to really stick to, at least in my opinion, we need to stick to what it is that makes sim racing great to begin with. So, I actually had a really interesting conversation with Jimmy Broadbent a couple of days ago about this, around his participation in the F1 esports competition. And obviously, that's been an absolutely massive thing for him. It's drawn in a huge crowd for him as well, and it's fantastic for him. And not in any way, shape, or form am I trying to say that he shouldn't be doing those sorts of videos, because he absolutely should. It's fantastic. And actually, if anything, I think it's fantastic that he is participating in those competitions, because what it's doing is it's bringing in that human element. It's bringing in that entertainment factor that would otherwise be missing. If you've just got a bunch of Formula One drivers driving around, none of them are used to sort of talking while they're driving or anything like that. And that is what Jimmy is absolutely incredible at. I mean, he's a really fast driver as well, but what he's really good at, and the reason why his channel is so massively popular, is because he's exceptionally talented at being entertaining while driving fast. And that's, something that not a lot of us content creators can do, at least not on his level. But yeah, what we were talking about was simply the importance of continuing to create content that's entertaining, continuing to, stick to those things that made our channels popular in the first place, and not getting caught up in just doing content that feeds the masses, not just doing the content that's going to draw the big view numbers, not just doing the content that's going to sort of capture the interest of people that might not necessarily be interested in sim racing long term. But yeah, content creation aside, what I think is really important here is, as a community at large, as a community of passionate sim racers, what we need to be doing is making sure that we continue to support the communities that are supporting us. So I'm not really talking so much about content creators here, because I think, for the most part, us content creators are in a pretty good position right now. But I'm talking more about the guys and girls that have been pouring their heart and soul into, running the leagues that we participate in, running all those esports competitions that have been around long before the lockdowns, long before the transition from motorsport. Because, those are the guys that are doing it for the love. Those are the guys that are slaving away. And I've got quite a few friends that I know for a fact spend absolutely ridiculous amounts of time for very, very little pay, just because they're passionate about what they're doing and just because they want to see the sim racing community succeed. And it's been a really frustrating time for a lot of those, because what's happening is, these big esports competitions that are transitioning across from motorsport, that are really all about the sponsorship dollars. While that's great for exposure for sim racing, it is actually taking some of the attention, in my opinion, away from, the raw sim racing competitions. And I think that that's a little bit dangerous. I really want to encourage you guys to continue to support those competitions. So I guess to summarize my thoughts here, while I think it is fantastic for sim racing that we do have all this extra exposure, I just really want to encourage you guys to, don't lose sight of the reason why we sim race in the first place. Most of us are not doing it because we expect to be the fastest driver in the world. We're not doing it because we expect to beat Lando Norris or Max Verstappen or, any of those guys. I mean, it's great fun to get involved. And I mean, it is creating these unique opportunities right now where we have these esports competitions and we can compare our times directly to their times. And that provides a lot of fun. But, at the same time, for the majority of us, we're never going to be as fast as those guys are in the real world. We're never, going to have the opportunity to drive a real life race car. And, for us, it's all about winding down on a weekend. It's all about, coming home from a hard day at work, and just unwinding and enjoying something, the relaxation that it provides. And, for me at least, and I've talked about this many times before, so I won't go into it in great detail again now, but just, jumping in the sim after a hard day's work and just focusing on the road ahead of me. And it sounds silly because we're talking about a game here, but, putting my headset on or, looking at the monitors and just focusing on the 100 meters of road in front of me and forgetting about all my other troubles and all my other stresses and anxieties is really what I love about sim racing the most. And I know that that's the case for most other people in the community as well. So I don't want to see us lose that passion. I don't want to see us get too serious about sim racing. At the end of the day, if we lose the fun factor, then we lose the whole reason why we're doing it in the first place. So yeah, keep enjoying it, guys. Keep doing what you're doing. And I want to also encourage all of those guys that are creating content that don't necessarily get the same number of views that channels like this do. So what do you guys think about this? Are you a little bit concerned like I am about the direction that things are going at the moment? Or do you think that it's all good and that all publicity is good publicity, so to speak. So I would really love to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on this. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's a really exciting time for many ways, but also a time that we need to make sure that we're sticking to our roots, making sure that we stick to the things that are the reasons why we love sim racing in the first place. And I think if we can do that, then we find ourselves in a position where things can only get better from here. So I'm really excited about the future. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens over the next couple of months as people start to hopefully come out of lockdown. But yeah, hopefully you guys are all staying safe out there. I know it's really crazy at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty around, you know, our jobs, our families, our schooling, you know, education for our kids, all those sorts of things. So stick to it, guys. You're all doing an awesome job, and I'm really enjoying the conversations we're having with you guys recently, particularly a lot of the other content creators. We've all sort of been pulling in together as a community recently and, you know, helping each other out, which has been fantastic. And a lot of the smaller channels as well. I know there's always a risk of becoming a little bit elitist with some of the bigger channels out there. And I know we're all sort of doing our best to sort of try and support each other as best we can, as well as the smaller channels as well. So keep going, guys. But yeah, let's keep this conversation going in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.